All right, well, welcome to the 23rd Let's Talk with the Mayor. As you all may know, if you've been to these forums before, this is your show. This is an opportunity for the citizens to ask questions. We're going to have 75 minutes of open mic. Nothing's off limits. We've got all of our department heads here. Public safety officials are here. As you can see, there's tables set up around the perimeter of the room. So if we don't get to your particular question in the 75 minutes, hopefully some of these folks can answer those questions for you. But we decided to do this about 5.5 years ago for the purpose of bringing government to the people in places that the citizens felt comfortable gathering, not requiring you to necessarily come down to the city government to be heard. And so that's what this is about. We partner with neighborhood associations, and I want to thank the Arbor Point Residents Association for sponsoring us this evening, and of course Tim and Joy with the Frank Chester Recreation Center. Thank you all so much for what you do and for helping facilitate this evening. But the snacks are as a result of the generosity of the Arbor Point Residents Association. So again, thank you all so much, and thank you for helping us get the word out. We're actually broadcast live on CCG TV and also on 92.1 FM and WRCG AM 1420, both PMB networks. And so we thank them for their interest in hearing your voice here tonight. So it's an opportunity to exchange information. There's some important issues that may be of interest to you. This isn't to limit the conversation. Whatever you want to talk about is what we're going to talk about. But some things that are going on that you've probably heard buzz about in the community. One, we have quite a few redevelopment efforts going on nearby. We have a lot of work going on and soon to be going on, investment in the old Casita Road area. The school district's going to be building the new Spencer High School over there. There's a lot of partnerships and efforts to bring additional development and investment to that area, and so that's exciting, and we have some folks with our planning department that may be able to answer questions about that. We've been working with folks over at the Winterfield area, which is basically the intersection of Casita Road, Brown Avenue, kind of that 5 points there, South Lumpkin Road, if you're familiar with that. There's a lot of opportunity there, been a lot of opportunity there for years. We've just had a hard time getting it off, getting it off the ground. And finally, we have some folks very interested in talking about what we may be able to do to rejuvenate that community, to rebuild the neighborhood. Of course, the Benning Tech Park was one of the first redevelopment districts that was adopted under the new law that the citizens so graciously and I think enthusiastically supported last time we had a referendum on the ballot for the redevelopment districts. And so we're looking to bring hundreds of jobs to the South Columbus area. And also in an innovative partnership, we actually made sure that in the construction process, those that were developing the property met with some of the local leaders in the local neighborhoods near the Fort Benning project to hire individuals in that area to work in the construction and development effort. So this is the neighbors building this development, which is an exciting and I think very thoughtful partnership and that hopefully we can replicate. I know policing has been a big issue. We've been having forums on policing and the various aspects of that for many, many years. But we continue to have them, and certainly we have the right folks here tonight to answer any questions that you may have about how Columbus, Georgia hires police officers, how we train them, how we oversee them, and in those few instances when it's necessary, how they may be disciplined. So those are issues that people are talking about across the nation. We're in the forefront of how law enforcement agencies deal with some of these issues, and so we're happy to talk to you about some of the things we've done and implemented to try to make for the very best, most respectful system of law enforcement, one worthy of the citizens of this community. There's also been a lot of buzz about thawing the freeze, and I know there's people here that want to talk about that tonight. In 1982, this city adopted a severely regressive property tax system We now know after 30 years that it harms about 75% of the citizens. You have to own your house for 14 years before you get on the good side of the freeze. We know it limits economic development in the communities that have freezes. Very few communities have freezes in the state or even across the nation, and there's good reason why. We also know it hurts all renters and investors and businesses who own property. So it's an important issue, but it's one in which we stand ready to answer any questions you may have about that process. But I'll just leave it at this. We cannot drive a 1982 Yugo into the future. And that's what this tax system is. It's holding us back, and when you compare us to Rome and Augusta and Huntsville, Alabama, and Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Athens and Savannah, we're falling behind and have been falling behind since we've had this system. It's not about increasing taxes, it's about switching to a more effective tax system. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that. Lastly, and then I'm going to turn it over to you all, we've been talking a long time about redoing our bus system and redoing it for the needs of citizens today. You know, the bus system in the 70s, kind of like the tax system I was talking about, just because it worked in the 70s doesn't mean it works in 2016 to meet your lives and your needs. And so we've actually redrawn our bus system routes to be more effective. There is no reason in the world why a citizen in Columbus, Georgia should have to take them 90 minutes to get to work. It's ridiculous. And we can do better, and we are doing better. So I want to talk to you about those routes. As I said, we've added a third shift bus service, which we've been talking about for about 2 decades. Ever since they ended the third shift bus service they tried some time back. We've now been able to reinstitute it. A press release went out today, and so we can talk to you about when that'll be kicked off, how it affects you, and also just a general vision of how to reintegrate public transportation into our lives today, because I'm telling you, the young folks don't think about public transportation like we do. There's no economic stigma to public transportation in their lives. They want to live in a community where they don't have to own a car. Not that they can't not that they can't afford to own a car, that they don't have to own a car. They want to be able to walk, bike ride, or ride public transportation to entertainment or to jobs or to whatever else, shopping, whatever else they want to do with their lives. It is an economic development issue because employers that come to look at our community and compare us to other communities fighting for those jobs look to see what our public transportation is and if it's good for their employees and for the young professionals they want to attract to work for their companies. So it's a whole new day. It's a whole new day in public transportation. It's not like it used to be. So we've got to make sure we service the needs of our citizens today, but also what's coming down the pike tomorrow. So with that, as I said, I'm not going to belabor. I want to introduce, we've got one of our deputy city managers, Pam Hodge is here. Is Lisa Goodwin here? Lisa? Okay. No, Lisa's not here yet. I think she may be coming a little later. But, and our city manager is actually out of town in Macon today. He was asked to go to speak to Macon about some of the efforts we've been making in public transportation, but also in cycling and pedestrian amenities and some of the partnerships we put together creatively to do that so as to not unduly expend funds related that were local funds, but to use federal and state funds and private funds to build some of this infrastructure we need to keep up with other cities. So it's exciting that Macon would have him come to talk about some of the things we've learned how to do to be a better city. With that, there's 2 microphones. You can either stand up and move to the microphones, or if you want to raise them, we're going to get a couple of folks. If we could have our volunteers, either Sarah and maybe, yeah, I think we've got somebody who will get you a microphone if you want to just raise your hand. So any question at all, we'll open the floor. Yes, sir, in the back. I think we got to get you a microphone or the camera won't pick you up and the radio won't pick you up. It'll just sound like dead air to them. Yeah, you can stand up and go either way. And if we could get one more volunteer too. I know, Sarah, we're taking pictures, but somebody needs to grab the other microphone just in case. Yes, sir.
Yes. My name is C.B. Porter. As mayor and Public Safety Director.
Yes.
I want to ask you a question regarding police misconduct. And it's defined, it refers to inappropriate or illegal actions taken by police officers in conjunction with their official duties. Police misconduct can lead to a miscarriage of justice and sometimes involves discrimination and obstruction of justice. In the case of police retaliation, you as Public Safety Director and Mayor, after all other measures have been exhausted by going through the police department, in your case, what would you do if you were aware of police retaliation, i.e. would you report it to the Police Officers Standard Training Council, the Department of Justice, or what would you do in that case?
Well, a couple things. I appreciate the question. First of all, it's not tolerated, misconduct and retaliation. If we find out about it, as you alluded to, we take complaints either orally and writing off the internet. However they come in, they are referred to our Professional Standards Department, which you mentioned a moment ago, and a full investigation is done on those types of complaints. And so there's literally statements and taken, and if there's any data, police cam, dash cam, that type of thing, it would be put in the file, made part of the investigation. So your question was, what if all that happened and you as a citizen still was not satisfied with the result of that investigation? You have several ways to appeal it or to object to it, let's say. A couple things. Once the investigation is closed, first of all, it's open records, so you can do an open records request and get the entire file, including any tapes that were made part of the investigation. If you think there's something that was left out, somebody that wasn't talked to, a view that wasn't looked at that you think they have, then you can make that appeal or that objection to the mayor, who's the Public Safety Director. We also have from time to time people come down on public agenda to the City Council and voice concerns about things that have happened that they feel the investigation didn't come out as they anticipated it would. And sometimes counselors will ask for additional information or to see tapes or to see statements or that type of thing. And don't forget, as I move on to the other rungs, because there's other steps you can take, that those city councilors and the Public Safety Director are citizen elected overseers. So we aren't professional law enforcement folks. We were elected and accountable to the citizens for the purpose of overseeing the law enforcement and public safety agencies, particularly the Public Safety Director. And I take that, of course, very seriously. So even then, if you're not, if you think it's unacceptable and the wrong course or wrong judgment's been made and related to those three steps I've just laid out, of course, you can report perceived misconduct, abuse, or certainly retaliation. And this is assuming you're a private citizen, when you said retaliation, because there's kind of two types of retaliation if you're employed by the city versus being a private citizen. But if you're a private citizen, of course, you can go to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and lodge complaints, and of course you can go all the way up to the Department of Justice, and hopefully nobody has to do that, but most certainly you can, to lodge complaints. And then, of course, you also can go into the court system. And there are civil rights of action for individuals who feel that the police in whatever jurisdiction have not followed their own policies or have broken laws, because there are laws on the book about police misconduct, what constitutes it, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. And so if you feel that a particular interaction has either violated the police's own standard of conduct, policies, training, procedure, or certainly a state law, then there's a civil right of action for that. So there's sort of several different ways to have a check and balance on law enforcement, because it's important. We don't just give anybody a badge and a gun.
I understand. I have one real quick follow-up, because
Sure,
I know you have other people. Okay, in the case of a serious crime
Yes.
being reported, and there's a police report that's made, and in that police report, it states specifics. Give you an example. Police will follow up with a photographic lineup, and of course, if they've gone to that extent and listed, all the information in a police report, of course, they would give them enough probable cause, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't done.
Mm-hmm.
In that particular case, if you're a victim of a crime in Columbus, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what the circumstances is, and a police report was initially made immediately after the incident took place, and all the public safety people came, they took information and what have you, evidence and all that, and nothing was done with the report. But it, in some cases, could have resulted into retaliation.
Right.
So what I'm saying is,
Retaliation by the police officer or by the person accused of the crime? I
by
just
the
wanna make
police department,
Okay.
it's a intricate situation.
Okay.
But just
Well,
put all
and
that
let
aside.
me-
Put all that aside. Just the
yeah.
police report itself is signed by a sergeant, which is
Mhm.
which is a a officer with rank or what have you, and there's a specific wording that there's going to be a follow-up
Yeah.
investigation with a photographic lineup, and you're the victim, and that never happened, and so forth and so on. I guess that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. All right. Well, a couple things. First of all, as you can see, when you have a particular circumstance you're talking about, and obviously this isn't the place to get into the particulars of whatever has
Exactly, yeah,
happened to you,
exactly.
which I wouldn't put you on the spot for that. It's always
It
better
doesn't matter.
if we have a private conversation so I can understand exactly what you're talking about and address it
I got you.
obviously more specifically.
I got
But
you.
just speaking generally, I would say this, that at some point, we need to remember, and I think sometimes a lot of people forget, police officers are sort of that initial line of law enforcement, right? So they respond to the 911 call, they arrest the suspects they believe, given the totality of circumstances or the possible culprits for this alleged offense, and they take them in and they do a report, and particularly for something that is serious, as you alluded to, that's almost always going to be a continuing investigation. So there might be investigators assigned to it from the police department, but the important point I wanted to point out to you, if it's as I think I hear you saying in this instant, the district attorney's office is going to be brought in pretty early. And so they're going to be the ones working with the police department as to what they need to get the probable cause, what they need to go forward with this case, because there are instances where perhaps somebody is called, made an allegation of an offense, a suspect or a potential culprit has been arrested, and if they can't make a case out of it because there's not enough evidence, the investigation doesn't prove to have enough evidence, the district attorney can decline going forward with the case. There'll be no prosecution at that point. So just know that sometimes when, as a community, we talk about some of these issues, there are things that people think are related to the police department because it has to do with a criminal offense and that process, but you've actually already moved into the district attorney's arena, and they're the ones largely calling the shots at that point, and they have their own investigators too. And the only reason I say that is because when you mentioned lineup, that could be something the police department did, but it sounds to me like maybe by that time the district attorney's office is involved. So they may have had some input on that. I just want to, we want to move on to other questions,
Okay.
but Chief, did I leave anything out? Or?
Left out the Public Safety Advisory Commission.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. We do have the Public
Actually,
Safety
what I'll do, I'll just come
Advisory
and talk with
Commission.
you. I'll
Okay,
just come and talk.
well, and he was talking about for complaints, we have the Public Safety Advisory Commission that you can ask them to look at an investigated and closed complaint. So if you file a complaint with the Columbus Police Department and say, look, you know, this guy was rude to me, or, you know, whatever, or broke protocol and practice by doing the following things, and the police department you feel didn't thoroughly investigate it, but they've done all they're going to do, there is a Citizen Advisory Committee. Their link is on our website too. Right there next to where it says file a complaint or commendation about a police officer, it says Citizens Advisory Committee. It has contact information for the chair, and you can call the chair or email her and say, look, my name is so-and-so, this has happened to me, I'd like you to look into it, and they can ask the police department to see the file too, okay? So
Okay.
there are a couple ways. Moffett, anything that I may have left out that you,
No, I mean, basically the police.
can somebody get Tim a microphone real quick?
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Both the police department and the district attorney's department have a great deal of discretion on whether they go forward on charges or not, and they investigate the case, and if they feel like it's too weak to go forward, they may not, or they may continue the investigation until they collect enough evidence. And they're not shy about going forward on most cases, because I'm with the Public Defender's Office, and we get a couple thousand coming through our office every year, so they're prosecuting them left and right.
Introduce yourself and just real briefly talk about what your role is.
I'm the Chief Public Defender for the Chattahoochee Judicial Circuit, which covers Columbus and 5 other counties. And basically, we represent people that don't have the means to hire a private attorney in criminal cases, mostly felony cases. And we defend a couple thousand people a year in our court system. So we're on this. We're part of this process, but the DA would probably be the one you'd need to answer this question specifically. But that's all I can tell you. They've got a lot of discretion on whether they go forward or not, and it's all based on whether they think they have enough evidence at this point in time.
Sure. Well, thank you, and thank you for being here. What else do we have? Yes, ma'am. Wait, we're going to get you a microphone so we can hear what you're saying. We're going to pass that down to you. If you would just state your first name.
I'm Katharina
Hi,
Cunningham. I live since 1980 in Oakland Park, and I always use the post office right here.
Yes.
Last year in September at 11:30 in the morning, two hoodlums tried to rob me. I was the only customer in the post office. Both of them went in. One waited in the lobby. The other one followed me in. And the big mouth postal employee, I bought $150 money order. She announced it real loud what I had in my hand.
Oh, no.
Real loud. I just buried my husband a month before. All I could think, please let me get to the car. How I made it to the car, I don't know. I had my keys in my hand.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I made it in, I pushed the button to lock the doors, and that one hoodlum came around and took his fist like that, hit the driver's side window. And I'm sitting there waiting for the glass to break in, but it didn't. So they finally left. I came over here to that police department to get me a report. I don't believe in the police department no more, not in the city of Columbus. I told him, please give me a report. And I told him what happened. He didn't like what I had to say. He said, I cannot write a report because they physically did not lay a hand on you. Following week, I went to the legal office on Fort Benning. He told me, the lawyer out there, yes, there is an assault charge.
Yes.
But that police officer over here who answered the door told me no report.
Right. Well, first of all, when did this happen?
Last year in September.
Last year in September. Okay. Well,
And I reported that a postal employee through the 1-800 number
okay.
because she announced it to them in what I had in my hand.
Yeah. Well, I just, we're going to have somebody, Catherine, come and speak with you.
It's too late.
I know, but it's not too late to get it right. If something, for God's sake, happened, we need to find out why in the world somebody would tell you that. Because you're right, if somebody's beating on your car while you're in the car, that is a type of assault and battery.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know, but they should have known that. And so there must have been something in the communication. I just don't know what happened, but we can find out who was manning the station that day when you came in, what they remember, because it's no skin off a police officer's nose to write a report. I mean, it just, why would they refuse to write a report?
Well,
so that's the only thing that's curious, is we need to find out why they wouldn't write a report about what happened to you.
His explanation to me was, I'm not going to write a report because they physically didn't touch you.
Yeah.
That
Well, like
was
I
his
said-
answer to me.
Yeah, like I said, he should know, that, like I said, that may mean that they could or could not have a weak case in the prosecution, but nevertheless, that's not for the police officer to make. I just am curious about what happened there. So we may have someone talk to you
So
about
I
that.
asked him,
Yeah.
the two punks walking down that sidewalk over there by that housing area, you can see them.
Mm-hmm.
Said, I don't have to go out there and look at them. They didn't lay a hand on you. There's nothing I can do for you. And that was it. Till I found out the following week when I went on Fort Benning, I went to the legal office. He said, yeah, that police officer was dead wrong. I don't trust the police in Columbus anymore.
Oh, no.
No,
Well,
no, no.
Well, I'm sorry you had that very bad interaction, but I'd have to say they do a good job, and they try
I
to do
don't
a
know.
good job. But
Not
I hear
with
you.
me.
We want to go and we want to come and see what's going on. So I'm going to have somebody talk to you before you leave tonight, get a little more information about
Okay,
that.
that's fine.
Okay.
It's over on Dalmit now. I live in Oakland Park. It seems like Oakland Park don't belong to the city. We're left out over there. On my block, Mr. Doorman got all them rental properties. He's with a guy, he rented the place, one of his home. He's got a repair shop working out of there. Lawnmowers, washer, dryers, refrigerators, freezers. Anything got a motor in because he got a thrift shop in Buena Vista. I went to Mr. Dorman's office, reported it to the manager. His carport is that high with motors, anything.
Let me ask you, I think, didn't you call this in? You've called this in to 311, I believe. Let me,
No,
is
no.
John here?
That was the neighbor across the
Okay, well,
street.
somebody's called it in. Is John Hutchinson here? John? John, you
Okay,
want to
I'm
come
not
and talk a
quiet.
little bit about violations of, yeah, that's okay. We've got this one here too. But we'll hear a little bit about violations of code, running businesses out of residential properties, and what the city does when those types of complaints
Now,
come in.
Mr. Doorman
Uh-huh.
is involved in that. He's renting the house to him.
Right.
Then across from me, I got a home is empty 3 years. Squatters live in there. The homeowner lives in North Columbus behind a gated community. 3 years, the lawn got mowed twice. 3 months ago, the lawn got mowed, and I thought the homeowner sent somebody there, so I went over there. Oh no, he said, I work for the city. I said, the city come out here and mow the lawn? And he explained to me how it works.
Right.
I said, God forbid the city paying that man $89 while that son of a gun sits in North Columbus and he's too damn lazy to come to their house. And I have to live with them squatters. They're direct across the street from me.
Okay. A couple things. Those are two really good things. Let's address them because we got other people with other issues. Number one, we're going to let John talk about when people living in residential areas are trying to run businesses, particularly sort of almost sounds like light manufacturing or something going on, I'm not sure, building engines of some sort. And we do get that call from time to time, and what happens. Two, you've mentioned about somebody living across the street, maybe there's squatters. It sounds like there may be renting because the person in North Columbus, I'm sure, is wanting to extract some sort of monetary value for the fact that they're in their property that they're paying taxes on. But in any event, you're right. When we have to go out because of a citizen complaint or because one of our officers notices and sees that a yard is in violation of the weed ordinance, which you can't have weeds that are higher than 18 inches, then there's a process where we put the owner on notice that you must go out. You're violating the local ordinance. You must cut your lawn. If they don't cut the lawn within a period of time or rectify whatever the violation is, then we will go out and do it, but we do charge it against the property. We put a lien on the property for that $89. And if we have to do it again, it's another $89. So we do put liens on the property when the city has to go out for the value, the cost of the city having to bring that person's property into compliance. So it's not just us providing a service to that individual not keeping their property up. We do get our money back through putting liens on the property. So with that, John, you want to talk about when people call related to businesses being run out of residential areas?
Typically when they call, like I said, I work with special enforcement. We go out to the site, we verify what's going on. Like you said, if it's a mechanic, and depending on the zoning and the location of that, if it is or isn't allowed, then we'll make sure we also call business license to make sure they have a business license to be doing this type of work if they're licensed to do it. If not, then they have to come to my office to get what's called a certificate of occupancy. So once they get that, if it's allowed. If it's not allowed, then we stop it at that point to say that it's not allowed, and then we proceed to cite them and take them to court.
You're right. Ma'am, and let me just say this, and I appreciate your comment, but when there's a particular dispute with a private individual, we're not going to let you, talk about the private individual and so forth. But nevertheless, that's a dispute with the person you said lives in North Columbus, renting or whatever the deal is, that's private. But the city can help you related to violations of ordinances, and so that's why I'm just addressing that part, okay?
Do you have the
Okay.
address that we can?
Thank you.
We can.
If you'll give us the address, we'll pull the file and see if we've been to that particular property related to the business, and we can also check on the status of the ones that have the high grass and so forth. We got 2 questions, yes and yes. Ma'am. Yes. Hi, Shannon. We're moving. We're coming to you.
My name is Shannon Hubbard, and I play softball on a traveling team. And my concern is Benning Park. We practice out here, and the lights are terrible. Just Labor Day weekend, we had a big tournament that came out, and nothing has really been done to Benning Park. The concession stand need to be re-renovated. Have you all thought about doing anything to Benning Park?
Yeah. Well, let's see. Who's here from Parks and Rec? They can speak about Benning Park. Is Holly here? Oh, no. Tim, can you pitch in about Benning Park? Can you fill us in? Yeah. Well, I think you do to be heard on the radio and on the TV. It's not hooked up to a general microphone.
Well, I know there's quite a bit of softball practice out here. As far as the concessions area, it hasn't been used or utilized in years. I can't speak intelligently on why that we haven't, gone in and renovated or cleaned it out and used it. I know many years ago, Benning Park was the South Commons. And, of course, when the Olympics came through in '96, and the more the efforts, attention went to South Commons. So right now, those fields are used mainly for practices. And just as Shannon just mentioned, during the times when they do have the big tournaments in Columbus, it's like a satellite field. And then the championship games are played at South Commons.
Yeah.
The fields are, I feel like our maintenance, Parks and Recreation Department does a good job of maintaining the fields. Now, I can't speak about the lights because I'm not over there at night.
Well, let's do this. I'm sorry that Holly's sick.
Right.
And so usually we have the Parks and Rec director here to answer your question directly. And Tim, I appreciate you
But
trying to pitch
they asked
in.
me to get any concerns and to relay them to Harley.
But
so
what
I'll
I'd
do
like
that.
to do is, Tiasha, raise your hand over there. See Tiasha sitting at the table right there? Before you leave tonight, if you would leave your name and contact information and let her just get a little blurb about it, we'll get with Holly or whomever, if she's out tomorrow, I don't know, but we'll get with her, figure out what's going on, and we can actually put a work order in for those lights and have our folks go down and check them and see why maybe they're not coming on, maybe they're out, maybe they're not as bright as they should be, maybe we need more of them, whatever it is, so.
Well, there are several lights that are out.
Yeah.
On one field, it's 13 lights out.
Wow,
And you
okay.
have a total of 4 fields in that area.
Yeah,
So I don't know exactly how many lights that are out on 1, 2, 3,
yeah,
but I know on field 4 it's 13 lights
wow,
out.
okay.
Mayor,
Well,
just for me
yeah.
being in this location, I'll go out tomorrow evening,
Okay,
and I'll get Carson Revel to get the lights on,
okay.
and then I'll check those lights, and we'll move forward with the work
Well,
order.
thanks,
Let's-
Tim. Like I
we'll do
said,
that.
thanks for pitching, but we'll get it to the director too, and just sort of do a comprehensive look, because things shouldn't reach that level without us. You know, we do sort of regular maintenance. They should be going down there regularly, particularly at night, to see how things are going. So appreciate you bringing that to our attention. We'll see what's going on, but do get with Tiasha. I want to recognize Evelyn Turner Pugh, our Mayor Pro Tem and Councilwoman, and so glad she's here with us this evening. We've got a question over here, and then, sir, I'm going to come back to you just to shake it up a little bit, get the other side of the room. Yeah, oh, no. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Thank you so much for this opportunity to show democracy in its true fashion. I would like to first compliment the police department. I think we've got the greatest Columbus Police Department of any police department in this nation. And I say that because I had the good fortune of going through the Citizens Law Enforcement Academy at the invitation of the chief, and I can honestly say to everyone here that it was the most enlightening experience that I had ever had in my life of 82 years, except learning to fly an airplane for the United States Air Force. In that regard, as we talked earlier, Madam Mayor, I am concerned, as many of my friends, relatives, neighbors are concerned about the tax freeze, the tax thaw. Not to get into the details of the fundamentals there, but there's one thing I think that bothers me more than anything else, and that is it a tax thaw or police protection that we're really voting on here? And I say that for this reason. Because as we know, back in 2004, the Georgia legislature authorized us to have a second loss, local option sales tax.
Right.
But there were two underlying prerequisites for that. One was that you had to be a consolidated government, of which we're only 3 in the state, and the other was that you had to have in being tax freeze,
Yes.
which we had. Now, my concern is if we lose this tax freeze, if we lose the tax freeze, have we lost one of those prerequisites that provided for the 2008 1% sales tax, of which 70% went for law enforcement to hire 100 policemen, the other 30% going for other city requirements? It seems like to me that if we lose the thaw, or if we get the thaw, we lose the underpinnings, the prerequisites, the requirements that the state laid out. Again, a consolidated government and an in-being tax freeze. And do we run the risk of losing that 1% that goes to the police department?
Well, thank you for asking the question, and the answer is no, and here's why. A couple of things. First of all, it is there's one problem with sort of the analysis, and that is your assumption that we're losing the freeze. The freeze is actually, the reason why it's called a thaw and not lifting the freeze is because the freeze would actually just be retired but continue to exist. So there would be a freeze system which no one else can get in. That freeze system will exist probably for a couple of decades as people are rolling out of it over time. So there's going to be an existing freeze system, is just a note of sort of a premise that was a little off related to your question. There's going to be a freeze system, it's simply going to be retired, and there's going to be a new tax system starting January 1, 2017, which is a fair market value system, which the vast majority of jurisdictions in the state of Georgia and around the United States of America have. So that's one thing. You're not losing the freeze will continue to exist for years. So even if what you were saying was accurate related to the OLOST, it will be a couple of decades before that would come true. But the interesting thing is it wouldn't come true even then, and this is why. Because the statutory language of the O lost, it was actually an additional penny, because Georgia law provides you can only have one permanent penny as a sales tax for general operations. So they allowed for another permanent penny. And the other permanent penny, they said, you were eligible to have a referendum if you were a consolidated government and if you had a tax freeze. And that's great. So we were eligible. We applied to the Georgia legislature. They allowed us to go forward. Our citizens did it. Then it specifically says in paragraph D that if ever you want to roll back to just the one sales tax, which is the original loss, so it says it very specifically, if ever you decide you had enough of the sales tax and you want to roll it back to just being the one, that the only way you can do that is by having the city council pass a resolution asking the Georgia legislature to put it on the referendum, so it goes through that process. It's on referendum again, and the citizens have to vote to release it. And so what that does is we were eligible to ask for it in the first instance, but once we got it, regardless of remaining a consolidated government, regardless of having a freeze or having a retired freeze or any of these other things, the only way the state legislature said it can be lifted is through that process. And as you may know, that when the Georgia legislature speaks to something, then no judge, no other person, no lower authority such as the city council or whatever can undo that. So it is only rolled back through that process set out in subsection D.
May I comment, please, ma'am?
Sure.
The other confusing thing about the referendum that we'll be voting on is the act itself, which is multiple pages of legal language which very few people understand. The act itself speaks of the former provided for. It speaks of repealing the authority that we have for the freeze. That's the way I read the act right here.
No, the word repeal's not in there, but go
Well,
ahead.
It's in here several times, ma'am.
It's in there. Not if you have the language that was passed by the House of Representatives.
It's repealed in here several times, the one I have right
No,
here.
the only
But-
place it is at the very end where it says all other laws, such as the law that is hereby repealed, which is the form language on all Georgia legislation.
But going back to Section D, as you mentioned, that would be an initiative taken by our local government, by our people right here, to get relief or to cease that 1% sales tax. I'm not speaking of that. I'd like to repeat again, the underpinnings of the authority, the prerequisites, whatever we might want to call it, the authority for that 1% 2008 sales tax are those two preconditions. That we had a freeze in effect, which we will lose if we vote the thaw, and the second thing is that we're a consolidated government. So I don't think that, in my judgment, and I'm not an attorney, Teresa, you know.
I know.
But in my judgment, I really think that this thing will probably be left up to the courts to decide whether we're going to have that 1% for the police or not, because it's the authority embedded in that 2008 loss that we're talking about. We're not talking about our local city government or our citizens wanting to relieve ourselves of that 1%.
Right.
We're talking about the underlying authority that will go away.
It's called eligibility, the eligibility to request the referendum. Again, I say, and I know obviously you have an impression and opinion, and I respect that, but it will not go away. It's being retired, and this happens all the time. And let me give you a perfect example. Right now, with the automobile ad valorem tax, which is a property tax just like real property tax is, there was a birthday tax system, which I'm in because my car is 9 years old. If anybody in this room has a car that's newer than 2.5 years, you're in a new tax system in the state of Georgia. You no longer can have the birthday tax. You have to pay your tax before you leave the car lot with your car, okay? So did that go away? Did I get thrown into your system? No, I'm still in the birthday tax system. And I continue to go down every February, and I pay my amount of money. My husband, whose car is newer than mine, he doesn't have to do that on his birthday, right? Because he's in that new system. So my system didn't go away. It was simply retired. It still continues to exist as long as any Georgian is still owning a car that is under that old system. That tax system continues to exist. It's just simply been retired and nobody else can get in it. The exact same thing is what we're talking about here. The free system will continue to exist So any prerequisite under your interpretation would make that assumption that you're urging a nullity, because we would still have the free system. It would simply be retired. Nobody else could get in it. Or, as the lawyers, and I appreciate, look, you know, you flew airplanes for the Air Force. I wouldn't even know how to crank one up. And I dang sure wouldn't know how to land one, right? And so I commend you on your expertise and knowledge. I happen to be a lawyer. A lot of lawyers looked at this. And I'm not sure which version you have, which I think is causing a lot of trouble, and I'd love to see it before you leave, just to make sure, because you and I are friends, we go way back, and I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing to facilitate the conversation. But this legislation was drafted by the Legislative Council for the Georgia Assembly, lawyers whose only job is to craft constitutional language. That's their only job. That's what they're pledged to do, trained to do, hired to do. That's all they're supposed to be doing. Not making friends or making enemies, writing constitutional language. And that's what they were asked to do, specifically by Representative Richard Smith. If you remember the history, he went down and said, I want to make sure this is constitutional. And then later on, when they gave it to him, he said in the paper, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right, and I'm satisfied with this language because the Legislative Council gave it to me. But just to make sure, because I have an additional responsibility to these citizens here, we had constitutional experts look at it at Troutman Sanders. Our folks looked at it, and everybody's comfortable that not only is it constitutional, but it doesn't put the OLOS at risk. And so I know not everybody's a lawyer, not everybody can be a pilot, not everybody can be a police officer or a surgeon. We all have our different gifts and our different trainings. But for the people who do this and know it and think about it every day, they feel very comfortable with this. And I'll add one other thing, and then I know we've got this gentleman here said he's not feeling well, so I want to make sure we get to his question before he may have to go. But I'll add this, that, you know, the freeze we had was challenged too, right? Anything can be challenged. You can challenge anything. You can challenge the First Amendment if you wanted to. As rock bed solid as that is, you could go in court and challenge it tomorrow, say we shouldn't have it. Now you maybe get thrown out of court, but you could challenge it. But anything can be challenged. But in the state of Georgia, there's a case called the Sims case, and it sets the standard for a taxation system, and particularly a taxation system that's voted on by the citizens. And it gives it the highest deference under the law. And the Sim case says, and I'm paraphrasing, and it says that any taxation system approved by the people in the legislature is given the highest deference under the law and shall not be declared unconstitutional unless shown in every respect to be oppressive and burdensome to a particular classification of persons. And then it goes on to say, and those who are challenging it shall have the burden placed on them of negating every single ground upon which the taxation system may be found to be valid. Now, that's a high standard. That's like jumping the Empire State Building in a single bound. It's a high standard. So, you know, that's what we're going under. That's why we feel comfortable with it. And I would just say this as we move on. I'm sure there'll be other questions before we leave. But the real thing here, change is always difficult, you know. But as a people, you have to move forward for today and for the future. We can't live in yesterday. And so right now we have a tax system for a 1982 Columbus, Georgia. And we have found a way, because there was a lot of, people tried to raise it in the past, and that might hurt people. So we found a way, a compromise, that we wouldn't hurt anybody that had it. You got to keep it if you had it, exactly as it is. You're just retired and nobody else can get into that system. But for all new people going forward who transfer a house or buy a new house as of January 1, 2017, they're going to be in a new system, and not some spangly, fancy system we just made up yesterday, but the fair market value system that has existed for decades and decades and decades and decades in 99% of the counties in the state of Georgia and across the United States of America. So this is not new, and this is not risky. The fair market value system is tried and true, and it allows us to grow and prosper as a community. If this tax-free system was so great, there would be more than a handful of folks that had it around the country. And ain't nobody got one as severe and oppressive and regressive as ours. And so that's why we've got to do something to be the Columbus, Georgia we can be. And we need to debate it. But in November, we're going to be making a big decision. And I surely hope everybody goes forward and says, I'm going to be okay. People have taken a good long look at making sure we can keep what we had and relied on. But for God's sake, we've got to let the city go forward into the future. So I know I see hands up, and sir, you've waited so patiently, but go ahead and just state your name if you would.
I want to apologize for not getting up.
No,
but
please.
My name is James Jackson. I've lived in Benning Hill since 1964, and right now it is the worst looking area in Columbus. We got houses up there that's got canvas on them for 2 years. The roofs is falling in and the people are still in them. I got one across the street from me. It ain't been rented in 10 years, and I found a motor scooter in it the other day stolen.
Oh my gosh.
But we need to get some people out here and get these areas cleaned up. It is sick to my stomach. And I got people that moved in on my street, and there's at least 5 trailers, and there's 2 vehicles that they switching tags because I watched them. And they all from Lee County, Alabama. There's none of them from Georgia.
Now tell me your name again. Is it
They
James?
repairing lawnmowers, they repairing trailers, you name it, they working on it. And a while ago when I started to leave home, it only had 1 lane of traffic because the other one had trailers parked on it.
All right.
Also, it makes me sick when these big tractors and trailers goes up in the housing areas. They back across curbings. Mayor, I wrote you a letter right across the street from me. That has not been repaired. And that guy was backing in sometimes 8 times in 24 hours.
Wow.
And the lights were shining in the front of my house. And nobody would do nothing about it. I talked to Mr. Hughley to get a ditch cleaned out. It was stopped up. I went up there one time and unstopped it myself. I own 3 houses on Douglas Street, and all that crap was coming down my Patton Drive. If you go up Patton Drive from Douglas to Munson on the top of the hill, there's 9 houses up there that's boarded up and needs repairs out of 28 houses on that street. And most of them is on.
All right. I'm going to ask you again to not use people's private names. But let me
I'm
tell
sorry,
you this.
but it is true.
Well, what's your name again? James. That's what I thought you said. James. Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, a couple things. First of all, let's talk about, there's a bigger issue, and I want to get to your specific issues, okay? Look, we all know, and it's not just happening in Columbus, Georgia, but back in the 70s and 80s, people started moving out, right? They started moving out to where there used to be cow pasture and a lot of trees. Now all of a sudden they got fancy new neighborhoods and shiny new paint and all that good stuff. People start moving out, leaving their houses here in Oakland Park, the lady said, some other at Benning Hills, and they move out. And what happens then, of course, those homes sometimes, as they got a little older, would move in to be rental homes and sometimes become more transient, meaning families or people would come in and not stay as long. They wouldn't be as connected to the neighborhood as your neighbor who lived next to you for 15 years, right? Okay, and so they didn't care as much about keeping the neighborhood up, or maybe they even facilitated destroying the property, which is sometimes a hard cycle to stay on top of, right? Because as soon as you can fix it, you said you own 9 homes, so I know you know. Oh, okay, 3. I got 9 somewhere. Oh, okay. But sometimes they're disrespectful to the property, and as quick as you're repairing it, then, you know, they're doing things to it. So it's hard sometimes to rent out property and keep it up to the level that you want it to be. So there's a bigger issue about what you do with neighborhoods once they start getting age on them. And one aspect of that, because we could talk about it all night and other people have questions not necessarily related to this issue, but one aspect of that is code enforcement, okay? And so when you have these types of things going on, like canvas on roofs, particularly if it's there, if it's more than just, you know, a month or two, that's something you can call into the city, right? Because that doesn't meet any code. You cannot build a house and put a canvas roof on it, right? Okay. Well, and I will tell you this too. I want to know, I want you to lead, John, and where is Drell? Drell's here. Are you familiar with any of these properties? Okay. All right. She's not familiar off the top of her head with these properties. John, are you familiar with any of these properties that he's mentioned just off the top of your head? Okay, well, if you don't have anything specific, then sometimes when people come and make a complaint, they say, I know exactly which one you're talking about, and they can recite chapter and verse. But I can tell you this, if you've called before and our folks have come out before, if you can give us the address, they will show you the history on that, okay? And so if there's been canvas on a roof, for instance, and it's been there for a long time, and as you said, particularly if it's in the paper and everybody knows about it, then the only reason that that is being allowed to continue is because, and I'm making some assumptions because I don't have the file in front of me, but most probably the owner of that property does not live in the state of Georgia, lives somewhere else. And so we're having to serve them through a different state system because it's their property. They can't come back from Colorado and find out we bulldozed their home without any notice, right? That would be an illegal taking of their property. So we have to give them notice, look, buddy, this thing is not being kept up to code. You got X number of days. Now, if he sells it to his cousin, we got to start all over again, right? If the woman who owned that house passed away and they never probated her will, sometimes it's almost impossible for us to find out who owns it because she died and left 3 step-nieces and, you know, 2 great-grandchildren by a marriage and, you know, and we can't find out who is legally responsible for that. So I tell you that to say something that's gone on that long has got a problem. There's a wart on that thing somewhere. Something's wrong with that. And so they can tell you. But let's assume they tracked the person down, they found him, they served him, they said you got so many days and he didn't do what he was supposed to do. If it's not brought back up to code, then we demolish it. And so it should have a big D on it. Well, if you say, well, there's a house in my neighborhood, it's got a D on it, it's been there for a year. Because as soon as we get the money, we're tearing them down. So it's kind of a first come, first served basis, right? And we got a list. John, how many properties are on the list right now to be demolished? 300. How many do we have money for? 15. Okay, so we're working it. Okay? We're working it. And when we find some extra money, we throw it in there to go demolish some more properties, okay? So we work the list, and every now and then, sometimes the Department of Community Affairs at the state of Georgia will have some grant money. We'll apply for it, and all of a sudden here comes $100,000 that we didn't have before. We go out and demolish a lot more properties. So we catch up. I just wanted to say, we're working it. If you'll get with, Drell, if you'll get with this gentleman, get these properties, let's find out about some of these things. John, it sounds like he may have 1 or 2 for you too, okay? And give him those addresses. If you feel you need to leave early, you know, kind of wave at him as you're walking out the door. Okay, good. I'm glad. And we'll respond to those particular addresses. Yes, ma'am. You've had your arm up, and then we'll get you. Yeah.
I stand up because I'm so short, you know.
Yeah.
I stand up because I'm so short, and you probably won't see my arm.
Yeah.
No disrespect.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Mama Love. I'm a retired female veteran. I said female because it's a big difference in what the men's get and what the females get. A very big difference. But the main thing, I'm God's servant. Now, I'm going to tell you this. I've been told not to come here and say what I was going to say. Okay? But God tell me otherwise, and I follow him.
Okay.
Okay. I was homeless from October last year. I was in South Carolina. God sent me there the same day he sent the flood there. So in December, I came here. Okay, I was homeless again. Nobody would take me in. Miss Harris wouldn't even let me eat because I didn't get there in time for church. I stayed Miss Harris for an hour. But anyway, God fed me that day. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is, I was homeless from December the 7th until June the 20th. I finally found a house with KPDD. And I rushed in there. I was tired of sleeping in my car.
Yeah.
So I was happy to sign a lease. But when I got to the house and read the lease that night, I called him that morning and said, no, I didn't know I signed all of this. Could I come in? But it was put off. I still haven't got the appointment yet. But I want to invite you and anyone else that can help to a meeting that's going to be held in November, the week before Thanksgiving. You will hear more of it. Some of us want to get together, put our heads together. I'm new here. I don't know all of your rules, so anybody could help. I don't want us to invent any wheels, you know, that's already invented.
Right.
But I've been put out of my home because I said that the day before, and I tried to get the meeting.
Yeah.
Then I'm living with fleas ever since the night I was in there. I done sent letters about that. The water is dripping in my bathroom and from the toilet.
Right.
I've been in the Army. God gave me 21 years in the Army, and I thank him every day. But I'm ducking and dodging flying roaches. I slept in the woods in the tents. Poured sulfur down so the snakes wouldn't get in the tent. But these flying roaches, I done told them about that. I bet you I got 3 or 4 letters. The last one I sent them was 7 pages long. 7 is a wonderful number, according to God. 7 pages long. They still haven't sprayed for the fleas. Guess what they did?
What?
They sent me a letter, and I'll be glad to give you a copy of it, telling me they're not going to. The owner said they're not going to do anything that I requested. They said they were going to terminate my lease, or I stop writing letters. I take it as is. So they gave me a choice. Okay? I wrote them back and said, I'll be at your house in the allotted time you gave me. I don't know where I'm going right now, but if God kept me for 65 years, if he kept me in my car from October last year to June of this year, sleeping in my car, he gonna keep me. I'm his. I done left some people that was doing the wrong thing because I didn't want God to be disappointed in me.
Sure.
You hear me?
Yes, I do.
But I want to invite you to that meeting.
Okay.
And I'll make sure you get an invitation.
Okay.
And like I said, I'm not the smartest cookies in the book. But my God, if you read my sign, it said Mama Love, a female retired veteran, God's servant.
Well,
not your punching bag or government.
thank you.
I sleep in my car. Please, anybody that can help.
Well,
Help get rights for renters.
well,
I'm paying my rent.
Sure.
Look like I got mold in the house.
sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to pay no rent and shut up.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
paying
a couple
$600 a month.
things. Okay. And Mama Love, let me address some of your questions. I know there's other people. And first of all, thank you for your service.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you. Glad to have you in Columbus. Thank her for her service, everyone. And now, and I look forward to getting the invitation. Just a couple things that I think might be some good news for you. We do have organizations, and Tiasha, raise your hand. See, there's Tiasha back there. I want you to get some information, how we can contact you, to Tiasha. We have a couple of organizations in our community. One's called United Way, and the other one is called Home for Good. And Home for Good actually has a lot of resources related to people who are what we call either homeless or housing insecure. And housing insecure means you may have a roof over your head today, but you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? And so Home for Good actually works with folks, and they have so many resources related to veterans. And we've just had an effort where we've put 86 veterans that were on the street are now in homes and stable communities because of this effort and this partnership with the city and Home for Good and United Way and others. So there are some resources out there. We just need to get you with them. As for the other issues, hold on a second. As for the other issues related to, again, the landlord, the renter, let me tell you what, if I ever had a public forum on lining up the landlords to hear what they had to say about renters and lining up the renters to hear what they said, we'd never get out of there. We'd just be there for 4.5 weeks. We'd just be talking and talking, right? Because everybody's got a side, everybody's got a perspective. So I respect what you're saying. It's just that that company, KPD, they're not here. And hold on just a second. And it's a private contract between you and them. But that being said, I can't help you with a private contract, right? Because that's out of my bailiwick. But I can help you get to the services that this city, this community has, which can help you. Now, I got a lady standing up at the microphone. Looks like she's been standing there a long time. She's going to have to lean on something. But, yeah, go ahead.
I hope and pray that they do come too.
Mm-hmm.
I hope and pray that we work it out together.
Sure, absolutely.
But those services that you talk to, I done already tried them. But we all know some veterans don't get help. Yeah. And I'm one of them.
Well, these are good services, and they actually are working, so we need to get you to them. You've been to Home for Good? Okay. All right, well, I tell you what, if you'll just leave your name, I'll talk to Pat and figure out why it is they can't help you, okay? And we'll see. We'll move along. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Now, I will say property maintenance under inspections and codes, we can talk to that. If you come to us, submit a complaint, we can go after the owners. I'm with the Inspections and Codes Department. No, ma'am. Well, I'll give you my card.
Well, you got John right
you
here
can call
right
me
now.
directly
That's
and
what
we'll get
this
it put
is
in the
about.
system. But if renters are in situations where they are in what we call unsafe conditions or not healthy, your water's not on, your power's not on, you can call into the city and we can review it. And we can verify that A, you're telling the truth, or A, you didn't pay your bill and they cut the water off and you're complaining on the owner. So we can follow up with those kind of situations. So we just need you, as long as you call us, I'll send a property maintenance person out there. We can verify the severity of the issue, and then we can write them up and cite the owner. We've taken them to court. It's no problem to us. So you just.
Yeah.
She showed up at my house unannounced 2 Mondays ago, and it's in my contract. Before anybody from the real estate agency come to my house, they're supposed to contact me.
Okay.
Before she come to my house, she's supposed to contact
Mama
me.
Love.
She didn't do it.
Mama Love.
So they breaking things too.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad you made your complaint to the Inspection and Codes Department, but John's here. He's coming right now to give you his card, so now you're going to be able to call him. We'll see if we can get at it from our perspective, okay? Teresa Alameen, then yes, sir, Bill, if you want to come after that. Yeah, Teresa.
Thank you. I'd just like to say very quickly on the property tax freeze. There's going to be a debate, and thank you, Mayor, for agreeing to participate, between the Vote No people and the proponents of Thaw the Freeze. Okay, it's going to be Saturday, October 15th, 4:30 to 6 at the Columbus Public Library in the auditorium. And I invite you all to come because we're going to have 3 for each side, and you can write your questions down and get them answered. But I just want to add this because I never heard of this thing called a property tax freeze, because I know that municipalities get their money to do business from the revenue of property taxes. And what I've noticed about this town, it's so dependent on prison labor, it is unbelievable. And that arc of the moral universe does bend towards justice. One day, you won't be able to do that. And that prison labor is in place to protect the freeze at the expense of employees. And they say save $15 million doing it. Well, $15 million is 500 workers at $30,000 each. But you can't save what you don't have. And the reason why you don't have it is because you have a freeze. And so it's just people say, oh, it's a spending problem. There's so much distrust, Mayor. It's a spending problem, not a revenue problem. It's both. It's both. You don't have the money, so you're doing what the mayor's saying. When we find the money, we'll go do the demolitions, et cetera. No city should have to live like that. I sit in the budget process, and I watch the council members up there wringing their hands, telling people who come before the council, we don't have the money. What is that to say to somebody? So I just think that if people could see beyond me, and their self-interest, how much do you love your city? That is a fundamental question. How much do you love your city? Because this city is growing in a way I have never seen cities grow. It's become an international city. And for people to be going on like that, but they still get to keep it, and you're going to get to keep it for a long time. And so it's just makes no sense to me. I just want to put that out. So I ask all of the parties to be a part of a debate so that the community can come. I think the room holds 120 people at the auditorium. Yeah. But the one thing I wanted to ask you, Mayor, just kind of switching gears, there's another very important statewide referendum on the ballot, and it's about opportunity school districts, which would mean a major takeover of local schools throughout this state. And there were quite a few schools, I think 9 or 10 here in the Muskogee County School District, that would be on that list of so-called failing schools. State takeovers of schools have not worked. Didn't work in Michigan, didn't work in Louisiana. It doesn't work. And so I was wondering if the city council has taken a position on this issue of the opportunity school districts.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. And actually, is there anyone here from the school district tonight? Yeah, usually Dr. Lewis is here. He may have had a conflict, and he could come and talk about it. Because we're two separate governing authorities, we usually don't take positions on other things that's not within our mission, even though our interests are greatly intertwined, obviously, with the education of our children and the preparation of our workforce and all the things that I know you're so very concerned about. So no, we haven't. We may, I don't know, it hasn't been brought to council. It may be something you want to ask a counselor, maybe talk to Mayor Pro Tem, see if there's any counselor that might be willing to bring that up. I don't know that they have taken a position on it. They usually don't take formal positions on a referendum. They'll agree to put it on the ballot, but they usually try to not take formal resolution positions. But do speak with one of them about how they felt about it. I'm sorry, I can't speak to it because it's not my lane, and it doesn't happen to be anybody here that can speak with it with the kind of expertise and authority you would need to illuminate people to the important decision. I'd hate to just do it off the cuff. But I apologize for not this evening happen to have somebody from the school district here. Usually they do come, but like I said, maybe there's a conflict. Thank you for inviting everyone to the forum. There's going to be a lot of forums coming up, so there'll be a lot of opportunities to hear more about this debate that you've heard a little bit about the thaw and the freeze. Very, very important for us. And just to touch on your point about taxing and spending and all of that, you know, we've really had a 30, 40-year discussion in this country about what is the appropriate level of revenue for government to have to provide the level of service that the citizens are demanding, right? And so as a point of interest, I just want to let you know that the city of Columbus spends $1,300 a year per citizen providing services. That is one of the lowest jurisdictions in the state of Georgia per citizen, and it is absolutely well lower than any comparable city. I think Augusta's at $1,600 per person. You know, Athens and some of the others are at $1,800 per person. You start talking about Savannah, they're at $2,400 per person, okay? So we're doing all we can with what we got. I know there's people who would say, oh, you shouldn't have bought this and you should have done this. And almost every time I hear one of those complaints, when we sit down and talk about how that thing happened, people have a little different perspective. But we're a city of 200,000 people, and there's a lot of people that think government should be doing this thing, and a lot of people that think government should be doing that thing. And so the process of our government is to find the balance that satisfies the quality of life our citizens expect and demand. So thank you, and we'll talk more about the forum. We've got several. Bill, if you want to come up. Is there a microphone, or have we lost the microphone? Bill, if you'll go to that one in the back there, that'll probably be easiest. Just go to the one in the back, and then we're trying to find out who has the other microphone.
I do. Right here.
Oh, yes, okay, so Bill, if you go, and then yes, ma'am, you'll be next. Okay. If you'll just speak in the one you're right there next to, Bill.
Thanks. Can
Yeah.
I be heard?
Yeah.
For me, thanks again to you and your staff for providing this opportunity for
Sure.
us to speak and listening to what I've heard so far, particularly from Mama Love. Sometimes our problems and issues take on a little different perspective when you hear the views of other people. And I'm here to speak for the Keep the Freeze side of the issue. And I want to do that in a respectful and, what's the big buzzword? And they want lawyers to be civil to each other. So I want to do it in a respectful and civil way. And those of us who are speaking, we probably came here with some kind of prepared question. But I just want to state in as few words as possible the big concern of the homeowners and with the tax freeze. And first I want to start off by, for those of you that may not be immediately familiar with it, the question that's going to be on the ballot relative to the tax freeze. It reads, shall the act be approved which eliminates the current base year assessed value homestead exemption for purposes of Muskogee County school and consolidated city government ad valorem taxes for homestead exemption property acquired after January 1st, 2017. Now, a little perspective here. This is the last item on a ballot in an election which we all have a great amount of interest in, primarily the election for president of this country. And we're all going there to vote for whoever we want to see elected to that position. And there's some lesser key candidates on that ballot. There's a candidate for senator. There's, in the 2nd district, there's a candidate for House of Representatives, and maybe some others. And there's some constitutional amendments, and if most people are like me, when you go to vote, you see some items on the ballot that you behold for the first time while you're standing there voting. And this may be one of those items that you're beholding for the first time. And it reads, shall the act? Well, first of all, the wording is written to elicit a yes vote. And you're ready to get out of there. And you go to the last, and it says, after January 1st, 2017. And you think, well, I got my house well before that, so that doesn't apply to me. So what the heck, I'll vote yes and get out of here. So you do that. But the big concern of those who have studied this, and I have studied it. By the way, I'm a retired Army officer. I spent 20 years as an infantry officer. And after that, I spent 20 years working for various companies right here in Columbus, Georgia. J.H. Williams II Company, Worthington Cylinders, Intermet Columbus Foundry for 11 years.
Bill, you're going to have to, we're supposed to end at 7:15, so you're running on gas fumes at this point.
And I also learned how to fly an airplane during that time. And I also, after that, I became a lawyer, so I know a little bit about the law. Not as much as Teresa knows, because she's been at it a lot longer than I have, and I don't want to get into debate with her on fine legal points. But the big concern for the homeowners is we're going to, if this thing is voted in, it's going to create two classes of taxpayers. And you were very articulate in describing that one case that's been upheld where the burden is put on the individual to prove the unconstitutional aspects. But here's the trap. This may be an equal protection thing. And if that happens, the burden shifts to the government to show a compelling reason for the law, and the courts will probably apply strict scrutiny if there's two classes of taxpayers where you don't have, and they're unequal. That's the big concern, that this will go forward, and if it's approved, it creates two classes of taxpayers. It will go to the courts. It will be found unconstitutional. And not only will this be thrown out, but the current exemption will be thrown out, because that constitutional provision will have been voted away. That is the big concern of those who want to keep the freeze. And thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. Bill very much for your interest in this important subject. I'll just say this because I know, first of all, let me just say we only have time for one more question. It's going to be this lady right here as soon as I respond to Bill, and I hate that. So if you have a question, hang around. We've got all these people at the tables, and you can be able to ask your questions to them. I'll stick around. You can come up to me. But just to respond to Bill, look, I know everybody's eyes go cross when you start talking about, you know, equal class systems and classifications and so on and so forth. And so I'm going to try to keep it as simple as I can. Retired tax systems are retired all the time. At the federal government level, we have an estate tax. And not too terribly long ago, they decided to amend it. And they said if somebody in your family has died before this time, then you're just going to keep what we've had in place all these years. But if anybody in your family dies after this date, then we got all new rules, right? And nobody said, well, it's two tax systems. No, it's not. It's one tax system for everybody that passed away before this date, and it's one tax system for everybody that passed away after this date. Our car tax, same thing we just talked about. If you bought your car before this date, you're in the birthday tax system, one tax system. If you bought your car after this date, you're in this tax system, the same thing. If you had your house before this date, you're in the free system, one system. It's retired, nobody else can get in it. If you bought your house after this date, you're in one system, the fair market value system. So there's only one tax system open at any given time, and what you're trying to suggest is that the world can never move forward. Nobody could ever get a better idea of what we thought in 1923, and we just can't do anything about it, no matter what. And the world just doesn't work that way. The law doesn't work that way. The law always moves toward the most rational understanding and interpretation of the facts at hand and the law at hand. And so it cannot be that the laws and the courts are going to find out, well, that's just tough potatoes down there in Columbus. You're just stuck forever. We don't care what happens. Too bad. You just got to live your life in 1982, even in 2055. Just too bad. That can't be. That makes the law an ass. And that's what courts say all the time. I won't be a part of the law being an ass. And so we're going to agree to disagree, Bill, and I do appreciate your opinion. But, you know, if you don't want to do something for whatever reason, because you don't think it serves your interest, you're going to find 9,000 reasons why you shouldn't do that thing. Truth is, none of us have changed very much from the kids we were when we were growing up. If you didn't want to clean your room, oh, I don't feel so well today. You're right, you come up with excuses and reasons why you shouldn't do something else. And so that's all this is about. We're adults talking about serious, complex subjects. You feel uncomfortable with it. It's not something that you're inclined to do or want to do. And so you're finding all these reasons why nobody else should do it either. But the bottom line is, as much as you can look at anything, this has been looked at. We've gone through court battles. We've gone through referenda in the past. This is hurting our community. And we have a responsibility to provide the best community and the best system and the strongest foundation for the growth of our community that we possibly can. You know, look, I'm going to be out in 2.5 years, right? I don't need to be talking about tax systems. I could go on, talk about all the things I think I've done for this community in my 8 years or whatever, but I can't leave this community headed for a brick wall. And right now, the tax system we have is not sustainable. If you want to be Perry, Georgia, then you keep the tax system. If you want to be Bainbridge, Georgia, you keep this tax system. You want to be Columbus, Georgia, you vote to thaw the freeze, okay? And so that's what we're going to keep debating. I appreciate your comments, but it's important about whether we're going to be a city of the future or a city in 1982. Ma'am, you're going to be the last question of the evening.
Thank you, ma'am. I just have two quick questions. I live in the Willis Plaza area.
Which one now?
Willis Plaza.
Okay,
Okay, this is one of the older neighborhoods. We have like the telegram poles with the wires, you know, that go to the house. My around the corner neighbor drives an 18-wheeler, which comes down my street, hit those wires at any given time, and parks on Swan. My question is, what is the regulation concerning the 18-wheelers coming through the neighborhood?
Such a great question.
Now, one other thing, this is simple. There are park and ride park that's being put on Casita Road. The road has been tore up for months and months and months. It's hard on your car. When will that road be finished?
Okay, and which road is that now?
Casita Road.
Casita Road.
Right there at the park and ride,
Right.
facility, right there.
I think we've got some good news for you.
Thank you.
Let's hear, I'm going to have, I guess, Rick talk about Casita Road. Who's the best one to talk about Casita Road? Or would that be Ali? Who wants to talk about Casita Road? John, do you have an answer on Casita Road? Aren't you the man of the night? Somebody get John a microphone. John, come over to the middle here and talk about Casita Road. And then, who wants to talk about 18-wheelers? Yeah, I know, sir. You wait for me afterwards, and we'll talk afterwards because we're already 10 minutes late. Is it the chief or is it Drill that deals with 18-wheelers? Is that you, Drill? Okay, all right. John, go ahead and hit us with Casita Road.
All right, all the pipe work has been completed. It should be in the next 2 weeks. It should be complete. They're putting they're prepping it, getting the rock down for the last layer of asphalt, and they should be next week coming to pave. So that part of the project, Casita to Joy, will be complete. Okay,
thank you. And I'll tell you something else, ma'am. Since you live near Casita Road, you're about to see so much great things happen on Casita Road. I mean, it's so exciting to see what's coming. And a real community, you know, the school and all the resources it's going to put there, and then some of the private partners we have, it's just going to change everything. And then on the other end of Casita Road, working with Winterfield to do some of the great things there, it's exciting to see the communities being rebuilt. Not bulldozed and remade, that's not what we're doing, but rebuilding the community, so it's very exciting. Okay, we had Drill, you're talking about 18-wheelers.
Yes, ma'am. It is against the law for 18-wheelers to be parked in a residential area. What the problem is that they come in, they park, they stay overnight, and then they leave again. What I would recommend anyone to do that has an 18-wheeler that's constantly being parked is to call my office, and I'll give you my card, and we will go ahead and put an officer out there to watch that area. When we find him, we will let him know that he can't be there. We'll give him a warning first, and then we'll issue him a citation.
Yeah. What about the cabs, Drill? Because that's a different rule, isn't it?
Yeah, cabs, I have nothing to do with cabs.
Okay, is that you, Chief?
That's-
Yeah, the cabs are, I tell you, this is I used to have this, ma'am, you didn't tell me your name. What was your first name? Ann. Yeah, actually, across the street from me was a rental house. And they, and the gentleman rented somebody who was a truck driver. And so he didn't bring the trailer, he just brought the tractor part home, right? And it's not against the rules to bring a tractor cab home, but I believe they can't park it on the street. I keep calling on the chief. Is that right? Isn't that? Yeah. Is that the ordinance or state law that you can't park a cab? It's an ordinance. You can't park a cab. And so who do you call if they're parking a cab on the street? Is that you, Chief, or Drill? Okay, all right. So if it's an 18-wheeler trailer, or if it's just the cab, you're going to call Lisa. Okay. Well, if it's fully loaded, that's a big fat no. Okay. Yeah, and we can also send an officer out if it's after hours. But get with Drill because she can set up a little situation where they wait. And the Mayor Pro Tem wants to help close us out. Somebody needs to get her a microphone.
Mayor, there are also some signs that you can put up in going into the neighborhoods, telling them that there's no parking of 18-wheelers in that neighborhood.
Okay.
Because I had to do that in my neighborhood.
Okay. So we can maybe get you some signs, too. And so get with Drell about that. Listen, folks, thank you so much. I know we've gone over tonight, but great conversation. If you have something, stick around or see one of the guys on the perimeters tables. And thank you so much for being here.